Hello and welcome to Executive TechTalks, the show where we talk to executives about their technology tribulations and triumphs. Thanks for tuning in. Before we begin, our sincerest thanks to this episode's exclusive sponsor. And now, here's your host, Johna Johnson, who will introduce today's guest.
Hello, everybody. I am delighted to introduce you to Seth Fox, who is the VP of Digital Workplace at S&P Global. Seth, welcome.
Thank you, Johna. It's great to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We are going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, next generation collaboration, because collaboration has suddenly taken such a high profile in what everyone is doing and certainly in the whole digital workplace area. So let's go ahead and get started. Seth, you and I talked a lot about this whole, this whole integrated experience during the hybrid working model. What do you mean by that? What are some examples of that?
Yeah, I think that when we talk about an integrated experience, we have to go back to ultimately where it started, and that was when we were all forced to go remote as part of the pandemic. This is what started the process. If you think about hallway conversations that used to be had, they've now been replaced by Teams chats or quick video chats. Meetings that were in conference rooms are now held in Zoom or Teams with everybody on screen, and you've got your Brady Bunch view. All of this carries over to a hybrid environment, but now we have to think about connecting those back in the office with those not in the office. So a lot of this still holds true. You're going to go into a conference room. You're going to, ultimately have some level of video maturity where you can connect a Zoom call or a Teams call within your conference room technology. So that's now fundamental to the integrated experience. But there are a lot of other factors that we have to, really think about. I think one is that you have to understand that building relationships is different. So now you may be part of a group where you've never physically met someone because they're remote and you're in the office. You may only see them or talk to them, 1 to 2 times a week on a video call. So you may want to think about different tactics to continue to build those relationships, whether it's additional non-work related activities or, maybe even adding in a few additional one-on-ones just to get to know people a little bit better. Another one that's sort of challenging is, how do you simulate this water cooler environment and create those moments of serendipity? So now you have to start thinking about creating drop-in rooms, virtual break rooms, or hangouts that may even connect into your physical break room, so that it then bridges that physical and virtual space. And finally, I think it's important to note that many of us have actually been working in a world where not all of our colleagues are located in the same site for many years. We're a global company here at S&P Global, and there are very few meetings that I take these days where I'm not engaging someone from a different city, a different state, a different country. So in a sense, we are all remote and have been doing this for some time in an integrated fashion.
Well, and I certainly know that because I've personally been working remotely since the 90s, and Nemertes has been remote since 2003. So while I certainly agree these are challenges, I would say that the technology has never been better to overcome some of those challenges. One of the questions that kind of constantly keeps bubbling up is in a hybrid workforce, you have some people in the office and some people remote, as opposed to everyone fully remote. In those scenarios, how do you keep the remote users feeling included?
It's a great question, because many of us are now moving from a scenario where we've been all in the office. So it's been a lot easier from just a cultural perspective to be able to connect people and include people. But now that everybody's remote, we need to think about this differently. So some of this is on the technology vendors that we use, right? No longer are we satisfied with just looking at faces on the screen in that Brady Bunch view. Now, some of the tools that we use are offering different layouts, different templates, and even clever use of backgrounds to sort of simulate everyone being kind of in the same place. The next step is then bridging those experience with those in the conference room. And we've seen some great use of this through some of the physical technology, like cameras that highlight the speaker and sort of focus in. We've got 360-degree cameras that help kind of bring everybody together within the conference room to those virtually. And we've also seen a shift in the physical space, right, in the conference room configuration to simulate making that video screen the actual other side of the conference room table instead of just being a screen, at the end of the table. And with that, you have to ensure that you have fidelity of audio and video because nothing is worse than being remote and then being unable to hear what's being said, in the conference room.
Yeah, it's funny as you talk about that. I remember probably over a decade ago, we had our first case of everyone meeting in person and needing to have a remote person participate, and we kind of had him. Zoom didn't exist then. I forget what we used. I don't remember what the technology was, but we basically put a laptop in the middle of a U-shaped boardroom table, and we had the talking head. And he was playing with virtual backgrounds at that point, and I think he put different hats on so you'd be sort of talking. But the problem was when you mentioned the quality of the image, it was horrible, and the quality of the sound was horrible, and he couldn't hear who was speaking. So the interaction was a lot less than it might have been. So I certainly hear you that essentially the idea of integrated virtual and on-prem requires a higher level of fidelity rather than a lesser level of fidelity, across the board for A and B.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, so I also just wanted to mention that, there's a technology play, but there's also a behavioral change that has to happen as well. For employees in the room, reducing background noise, reducing that chatter, reducing crosstalk, and ensuring that they're actively engaging the people not in the room is critical. And this is a learned skill that takes time and patience to master. So I think that there's a cultural aspect to this as well.
Seth, it's wonderful, and I think people can even see it in our interactions. I actually met with IT folks at a company I won't name because they didn't agree to be named, but I met them at a conference, and I was stunned that every single person never interrupted. If you interrupted them, they would stop immediately, focus their full attention on you, and wait until you were fully finished. They would respond to your questions so they showed they were, or comment, so they showed they were listening, and then pick up what they were saying before. And I was so intrigued by this that I asked them where this came from, and they said they had actually undergone training for how to interact more effectively. And in this case, it was in person, not remotely. But given the constraints of online interaction, I can see that training like that would be very, very valuable. Before we continue, I want to take a quick break so we can get a word from our sponsor, and then we're going to come back and talk a bit more about the emerging technologies that enable this next generation collaboration.
Nemertes is proud to sponsor this episode of Executive Tech Talks. We are a client-centric research advisory and consulting firm that analyzes the business value of emerging technologies, providing strategic recommendations to help organizations deliver successful technology transformations to employees and customers. Nemertes Better Data helps clients make better decisions. Join Nemertes CEO and Content Committee Chair of the WSTA, Johna Johnson, in this video series of candid conversations providing unprecedented insights into relevant topics of interest with industry leaders in the financial services industry. And now, back to our show.
Seth, what are the, call it half a dozen, 3 to 6 technologies that you think going forward are going to be absolutely critical to next generation collaboration? I mean, just to clarify, now that Zoom is table stakes, digital whiteboarding is pretty much here. What are the future technologies that companies should be investigating?
Yeah, I think to your point, right? I mean, we've discussed Teams and Zoom. It's almost trite these days to continue to talk about them as next generation tools. But I think that there are a few things that are going to happen. One is I think virtual whiteboarding is going to be critical to this next generation collaboration. Prior to the pandemic, if you wanted to share a whiteboard, you'd either purchase one of those, really expensive, hard to deploy, hard to use whiteboards that allowed you to digitize the content, and then after a couple of uses, they probably sat unused for a while, right? And then the other model was where you maybe pivoted your camera to the whiteboard, and you could maybe barely see this. So I think that finding that digital space where you're now able to bridge the physical and digital is going to be really key. So that means maybe using a native whiteboarding tool that comes with Teams or comes with Zoom, or maybe even a product like Miro or Mural that allow for real-time or offline collaboration in simulating a number of those whiteboard-like use cases. The next phase there is then thinking about how your office-based employees interact. So it might be leveraging something like a Surface Hub or a Vibe Smartboard or one of those technologies to allow you to do actually digital whiteboarding in the conference room. Or maybe it's providing tablets in collaboration rooms, or maybe it's empowering employees to use their own touchscreen devices. I think that that level of interaction is going to be very key. Beyond that, I think there are a couple other things that I would want to mention. One is around tools that do user experience monitoring. This is very interesting to me because pre-pandemic, nearly all employees were in the office, and you had a kind of a controlled environment, and you knew that if there was a problem with wireless, you maybe even knew about it before your employees, and you could resolve it. Now, at S&P Global, over half of our endpoints are connecting from a home office. So we have no telemetry in there typically, right, to an employee's home office. And so we now are seeing tools that are providing user experience scores to help quantify the different dimensions of employee experience, from like performance to stability to security. And then to that point, I would just say that to kind of close that loop, technologies that help secure our assets and information without compromising the user experience are going to be critical. We're moving more and more towards these, zero trust models and away from legacy technologies like VPN. So ensuring that we can securely connect into our cloud-based services and get access to our data and still be able to control and secure that is absolutely something that not only I'm thinking about, but obviously my peers in the cybersecurity world are concerned about as well.
Thank you so much for giving a quick shout out both to cybersecurity and the concept of VPNs as legacy technology. This is a hard conversation to have, but many folks are finding that the hybrid workforce is really driving a complete pivot in their cybersecurity strategies from zero trust as something we'll get to someday to something we need right now, because it's the only way we can deliver that quality of experience with the level of security that we need. So thank you for that shout out. What about some of the more futuristic things? And I know my all-time favorite image is this idea of meeting in an office space via cobot. So each of us is controlling a robot. We can control how we present ourselves as robots. We can interact, but we are, a mile to 1,000 miles away from that robot, so that the robots are doing the interaction, which also could lend itself to some really interesting experiences like doing at the bottom of the ocean or in outer space at some point. I mean, do you see any kind of human machine robotics components to this, or is that too far out there?
It may be too far out there. I love the concept of this, sort of Star Trek, type environment where, your personas may be embodied in a robot, or you're doing things from a hologram room. I don't think that we're quite there yet, obviously, and I don't know that that's going to sort of create itself over the next 5 or so years. I think that on the enterprise side specifically, you typically tend to align around what makes sense for your employee base, your own culture, and I think that particularly here from a financial industry or financial services perspective, we're probably moving at a slightly slower pace than maybe, say Silicon Valley, where, there might be startups that take advantage of some of these things. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be moving forward, because I think that there is a lot of room for artificial intelligence and machine learning and those types of capabilities within the future state space. The big thing for us, in particular, is how can we continue to make life more frictionless for the employee? And that's my future state, is to remove all of the burden, all of the overhead, all of the churn from the employee experience, and getting support, or connecting to their cloud-based services, or their work assets. So using AI and ML to sort of bridge that, whether it's the virtual assistant that completely understands natural language, and you can actually have a conversation with this type of bot. We're starting to see a little bit of that within the enterprise, and I think that's going to really start to develop over the next several years, to, at some point, maybe we are having a conversation with a conversational assistant across from us that is actually a hologram.
Well, it's interesting that you raised that because as you were talking, I was thinking about, well, how exactly would AI go into play? And then I realized, as you kept talking, that the camera that I'm looking at you through is actually AI enabled. It's AI pan, zoom, tilt. And were I to get up and dance around the room, it actually would follow me. So you would be able to see that. Fortunately for the viewing audience, that's not going to happen. You don't want to see me dance, I promise. But another use of AI, when you started talking about, just sort of embedded in applications, I've actually got a little AI app that optimizes my calendar for me, and it's been a godsend. Because I, try to make sure that I have enough time each day to do thinking and focus work, as well as talking to clients and, taking briefings. So it sort of sneaks in around the edges, and, with my colleagues using the same app, it can sort of say, well, this call needs to be moved from this moment to a different moment, and I can move it across all the calendars. So it is another example. But jumping from the far future with our holograms and robots and cobots to the practical, and kind of wrapping up with, what would you say in 2021 the essential kit for remote workers should
Well, I
include?
think fundamentally you're talking about kind of the basics, right? I mean, you obviously have probably a laptop or tablet type laptop that you can move from home office to your coffee shop to into the office, right? But when you're at home, you probably want to feel comfortable and productive, right? So that means that you have to have probably 1 to 2 monitors, one of them with an integrated high def camera, right? I mean, that again, those are table stakes. You need to have some sort of kind of docking station, or station where you can connect everything in, maybe a mouse, maybe a keyboard, wireless headphones. And then beyond that, we're starting to look at offering up things in the form of premium devices, like a Jabra speaker puck, as an example. I have one of those that I use from time to time to just sort of take a break from, the earbuds, where you kind of get some fatigue from having those in all day. Yep, exactly. And then for those of us who do media engagements, we also have presenter kits available, right? So, you have maybe a DSLR camera and a boom mic, which I think that you have as a setup. And that's going to create a bit of an improved experience, particularly for those employees who are on camera quite a bit, or who are doing speaking engagements regularly. And then I think, technology is one thing, but beyond that, the ergonomics are also critical, right? So we do have programs available for employees to purchase chairs and desks that are suited to their needs, whether that's an ergonomic chair, or whether that's the sit stand desk, as an example. But ultimately, Johna, what we're trying to provide here is some level of equity between the home and the office, right? So that there's really no distinction where you're working.
And that is a wonderful way to end this episode. Seth, thank you so much for your insights, and many thanks again to today's sponsor. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for participating, Seth. Well done.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. I hope everybody found it useful.